Hey folks, welcome back to the channel, your home for all content Lord of the Rings home. Today we're going to be doing another speculation video. If you're new to the channel, a few months ago I did a long-term speculation video where we went through each of these sort of bins or buckets or categories: game modes, character releases, character progression, what if, and factions. And I made some predictions. We then checked in on those predictions either earlier this month or the end of August, and it turns out I was mostly wrong. I got a few things right. I got like 2 or 3 things pretty spot on, actually. But there's actually a lot that I did not get right, or I was off by a little bit. The Fellowship actually really ended up throwing off my timeline for what I thought was going to roll out. But I think this is a fun little exercise. It gets me a little excited about the possibility of things in the future for this game. And it's just kind of fun to speculate, right? So I'm trying to do a tight 12. We'll see if I do that. So let's just hop right into it. Okay, let's start with game modes. I'm going to give myself an easy one. Q4, is it technically Q3 or Q4? Doesn't matter. Chapter 4 of the raid is October. That's an easy one. That's a given. They've already said that they're going to do that. Let's talk about the multi-squad PvP. I think this is going to be Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year. Basing that on the interview with Atana, some stuff that they released on release day when they did like all these news and press articles. So I think it's either going to come at the end of this year or very early next year. And then I think there's a couple of options they have to go. I don't think they're going to just go right into a new raid, but I think there's a few different options. And Nick kind of touched on this a little bit in the interview. They want to build up the coordination and communication infrastructure in guilds right now, so that's why they're not releasing a guild versus guild. They're starting with the multi-squad PvP. So I think you could either do a guild versus guild mode after this, or you could do something like territory battles from Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, which are basically these big guild events. It's still PvE, but it's different than a raid, and they kind of focus and emphasize on big battles in the Star Wars universe. They're different layout than raids, I would say. If they do a TB type experience in home, I mean, I would like to see it, but I would like to see them put their own spin and polish on it, revamp the experience, make it something unique and interesting. But I do think there's probably a great want for something like that, because I think about the idea of, let's say, going through a multi-stage battle with my guild that is essentially like Helm's Deep. That gets me excited. I think that's a very easy and good opportunity to implement something like that. I actually think that's going to come first before guild versus guild. So I want to say, let's say like a TB type mode. We'll put that Q2. And then after that, I think in Q3, Q4 will be the guild versus guild. I don't think they're going to wait too long, because I think that competitiveness in guild versus guild does keep your whales hooked and in there. But I do think we probably have to build up a little bit more for the general player base. So I'm still kind of leaning towards like a territory battle type thing first, and then a guild versus guild. But I think this will come second half 2024. All right. That's it for me. The cropping on the images here for Frodo are pretty weird. It looks like there's like a Fellowship Voltron or something like that. It's the best I could do. Let's talk about character releases. There is a lot to go over for character releases. Let's first talk about the month of October. There are a few things to consider. It is spooky month. It is Halloween. It's obvious to try and do something thematic with that. I think that happens sometimes in a lot of these games, is they do release, especially for Halloween, something thematic to that. We know that Elrond is probably returning pretty soon too. We know that Chapter 4 of the raid is also coming in October, and for Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, they sold us a team in the month of that chapter's release. So there's a few things at play here. Is the team that we're going to be getting to in October related to Halloween? Is it going to be a Chapter 4 team? And is it going to be something related to the Witch King? So that's a lot to kind of unpack. Let's just start with Elrond. I think Elrond is going to return October. I'm giving myself a lot of leeway here, because I think it could be the start of October or it could be the end of October. I hope it's the end of October. That way it gives people a little bit more time to get to 5 stars when they're free to play. People are just now starting to maybe get through 5-3 Shadow and get to their Arwen node. So I think this is a good amount of time if they continue to kind of focus in that they would be able to unlock Elrond. More than likely, I think it'll probably come in the first half of October, just to put the squeeze on people, maybe get them to shell out a little bit. We'll see. But I think there's a few options here for October. You could either do Dunlending, you could do Nazgul, or I think those are probably your two options. I'm gonna say they're gonna do Nazgul. I think that makes sense to me. So basically, they have Elrond return in October. They release Nazgul in October, and then you announce the Witch King end of October, early November. I'm gonna say probably early November, very, very late October, though. I think that makes sense to me. Now, a better question maybe is, what are you going to be using to unlock the Witch King? If it is Nazgul, I would like it to be that, because then it's, again, a team where you use it with that character that you're the legendary that you need to unlock the character. I prefer that than the opposing faction stuff. It just feels better when you can then use the legendary with the team that you built up to unlock the legendary. I like that quite a bit, but that poses a problem. You would need probably close to 5 marquees or 5 releases of characters to be able to have them be the unlock for the Witch King. And 5 marquees in a month sounds pretty miserable, so I'm not sure about that. So another option is, of course, the data mine said it was Haradrim. That data mine is very old. I really don't know what to believe anymore. But I think that's a decent guess still. Something that you could use to unlock the Witch King. I think another possibility is Gondor, using to unlock the Witch King. So for my money, I still think I'm going to go Haradrim. We'll see if I'm right. But I am choosing to go Haradrim. I think that makes a little bit more sense to me. But I think that's actually something I feel very, very up in the air about. Let's talk about the next big character that they're going to release. The next large character that they're going to release. In the interview with Tana, Nick mentioned that it's going to be a dark side character. They don't have any light side characters on the roadmap currently, large light side characters. So he also said it was going to fit into a dark side squad in an interesting way. I think that kind of leaves 2 options, and I think it could be Shelob. I think that's actually the only option. I think Shelob is the only option I can think of. There's definitely more options out there, but I was also thinking, okay, if Shelob is coming, it might be interesting that this is where they could maybe work in Gollum. So I think this will be coming definitely by the end of the year, but let's try and narrow it down to a month. I'm going to say November. So Shelob, November. And a side prediction, we also get Gollum. Okay. What about December? Now, hear me out. I think it's going to be Fellowship. Here's what I'm thinking. They're going to do all 4 chapters of the raids are going to be out. People are going home for the holidays at the month of December. They're going to ramp up advertisement spending because people have downtime. They can pick up this game. And how do you get them hooked? You give them something that they want to play, and that's the Fellowship. I also think that people are going to start unlocking Gandalf towards the end of December, at least the big whales and krakens. So it makes sense that you then start to release some of that team to fill out Gandalf. I'm a little bit torn, though, because I also think the next legendary is Aragorn, and I think that will be Q1 of next year. I think he kind of acts as like a Commander Luke Skywalker type situation. People would really want to play with Aragorn. He's definitely legendary. I think he'd be a cool addition to the Fellowship team. The CLS or Commander Luke Skywalker team had R2-D2 in it, which was also a legendary event. So I think this kind of makes sense to me that there are multiple sort of high skill level or high requirement level characters to go with the Fellowship team. That is a team that a lot of people want to pursue me included. I said I was going to ball out for Fellowship, and I definitely plan on doing that. So that is kind of where I'm at there. Okay, enough with character releases, because that's where I actually missed the most, I feel like, from my last video. Let's talk about character progression. We know glyphs. I'm going to give myself another easy one. Q4. It's coming by the end of the year. Easy enough. Now, what about other types of progression systems? Well, I actually think they're going to add new campaigns and access to purple materials also by Q4. So I think there's going to be a better farmability or ability to farm those purple materials, not just doing the raids, by the end of the year. I think they're going to release some of those new campaigns as well. And I think that will also kind of go hand in hand with glyphs. I don't know if it's going to be exactly tied with glyphs, or like you can only progress in those campaigns if you have the glyphs, but I think there will probably be some new campaigns out by the end of the year. Levels. I think there will be a level increase sometime next year. I'm going very broad there. I think that is what makes the most sense to me, is doing some sort of level increase at some point next year, but I think they got to work on some other forms of progression, or other forms of content rather, before that. And I think that glyphs will kind of tide us over for a little while in terms of customizability, and there's a little bit of RNG factor when you do these types of progression systems and building them up and whatnot. So I think that'll give people things to chew on for a little while. So I'm going to say level increase sometime next year. I think we're going to stay at gear 10 for a while, though. I don't see that changing. You know what? Let's just say it. Let's go up to gear 12, and I think that will also be sometime next year. But these are things I don't think are coming like Q1 next year. I just think they're probably going to happen at some point next year. Okay, let's talk what if and factions. We know that the first what if character is something to do with the Mines of Moria raid. Something changed about the Mines of Moria raid. We also know it's something to do, it does not have something to do with the Fellowship. So I think there are probably two options I'm thinking about. I definitely think it's dwarf related, which I'm obviously very excited about, and maybe that's kind of giving me tunnel vision here, but I do think it could either be Durin or Balin. Balin would make a little bit more sense to me, just because it has something to do with Thorin's Company, and we already have Thorin's Company characters in the game. Durin, obviously, the Balrog is named Durin's Bane because, you know, he was in charge, I believe, when they basically dug so deep that the Balrog got released. I think those are two different options. I'm not sure how interesting it is to have Durin just be like, well, what if we didn't dig up the Balrog? So maybe Balin, but I think it's definitely going to be a dwarf, and I think that will be coming by the end of the year too. Now then you may be asking, well, how does that fit? How are they going to sell marquees around this? I think it might just be something that they, like, you use this new what if character to kind of round out your dwarf squad, and you can take Gimli out if you need to, or if you don't have Fro up, you can use Gimli and not Fro, and you still end up with kind of 5. But I think the dwarves are going to be probably the next faction where we get more than just 5 characters like we have for elves, and a lot of orcs actually too. Okay, let's talk about factions. No, let's back up. Second what if character. I think this will probably be released sometime next year. I know they said possibly in one of the interviews that they were thinking there could be a second one this year, but I'm not so sure how that would fit in unless it's already tied to the first what if character that's also a dwarf. So let's say that it's going to come out first half next year. And I'm just going to keep predicting it until I manifest it into existence. Ringwraith Frodo. First half next year. I don't care if I'm wrong. We're just going to keep saying it until it happens, okay? I do think that Dark Galadriel is coming. When she is coming, it's really hard to say because I'm just not sure how she fits into the timeline currently. So let's say Dark Galadriel 2 years out. Okay. Now I want to talk about some factions I think are going to be focused on coming up. I think there are a few factions that are going to get more love in the first half of next year. So let's do Thorin's Company, Rohan, and Dunlending if they aren't released in October. I think that's first half next year. Okay, I'm running out of room. That's okay. What if we, there we go. Oh, we made it really small. That's okay. You can still read that, right? Okay, last thing I want to talk about, though, is a faction I would personally like to see come to the game, specifically next year. They seem to be focusing a lot on the Fellowship and the Hobbit and the characters around that times like series for now, but I would really like to see them get into Numenorians sometime next year. I think that would be really awesome to see. We can kind of move away. We get a good base of Hobbit and Fellowship characters, and then we can kind of move into some different age stuff. I think that would be really awesome. All right, that's it from me. Let me know what your wildest prediction is, or if you think I'm just full of shit or not, down below. But that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and take it easy.